Elizabeth Petrovna was a Russian princess, the daughter of Peter the Great and his second wife, Catherine I. As her mother was not a high-born lady, Elizabeth's legitimacy would be questioned throughout her life. The princess had a fine education and was naturally brilliant, but as she was not of pure noble birth, not many resources were spent on her, because no one thought she would inherit the throne. Hoping for a union with King Louis XV, she studied French culture. However, the king's family rejected her due to her mother's bloodline. With her education placed under foreign tutors, Elizabeth found in music and dancing a passion that would last a lifetime. She became an excellent dancer and horsewoman, and was fluent in German, French, and Italian. Upon her father's death in 1725, Elizabeth was too young for the throne, so her cousin Anna took over as Empress. Raised in a sequestered environment, the flighty and beautiful Elizabeth was fairly indifferent to whatever might happen in Russia's power corridors. She was content with being a social butterfly and Russian society's fashion leader. This apathy pleased Empress Anna, who saw Elizabeth as a threat, since not only was she the daughter of Russia's legendary Tsar, but as a stunning woman had many supporters at court and in the army. Therefore, Anna did not like being around the lovely Elizabeth. Perceiving the Empress's unfriendliness, Elizabeth did her best to avoid her company. Instead, she occupied herself with things more common for a woman of her standing: men, clothing, and her beauty. Elizabeth was regarded as the leading beauty of the Russian Empire. The wife of the British ambassador described Elizabeth as fair with light brown hair, large sprightly blue eyes, fine teeth, and a pretty mouth. She is very genteel and dances better than anyone I ever saw. She is extremely gay and talks to everyone. Elizabeth perhaps enjoyed the life of luxury a bit too much. For years, she trounced around Russia, courting numerous lovers and spending exorbitant amounts of money. Her lifestyle was very carefree, often being the center of attention in balls. She was also very popular with the army and most Russians, who were complaining that compared to Peter the Great's reign, Empress Anna lost all its prestige to the Germans she favored. At the age of 32, due to her grace and charm, practically every noble in Russia preferred her as a leader to the current rulers. In 1741, a matured Elizabeth, unhappy with the corrupt and weak Russian government, was ready to take back what was hers. On November 25th, Elizabeth, a deeply religious woman, had been praying all morning for guidance. From there, she walked over to the headquarters of the palace guard, with a metal breastplate over her dress and a silver cross in her right hand. The men of the palace guard had known the princess her entire life. Elizabeth was a gentlewoman who always treated them with kindness and courtesy. Elizabeth was even godmother to some of their children. The guards, who had never seen Elizabeth so determined, immediately rose to attention. Elizabeth stood before the troops, shouting, "Who do you want to serve? Me, the natural sovereign, or those who have stolen my inheritance?" With the guards at her side, Elizabeth walked over to the palace and procured the throne, without any bloodshed. Elizabeth would reign for 20 years. She proved to be a highly competent ruler in many ways. However, most people would admit, Elizabeth wasn't nearly as interested in running the affairs of state as she was in throwing a good party. Elizabeth could be lazy and perhaps enjoyed luxury a bit too much to attend to her job daily. Official documents often waited on her desk for months to be signed. Her duties as Empress were set aside to her enormous enjoyment of parties and fashion. Music, gowns, balls, all of this captured her attention. Nevertheless, in the eyes of the world, Elizabeth brought prestige to Russia. Under the reign of Elizabeth, the Russian court was one of the most splendid in all Europe, and people traveled all over to come to her gatherings. Foreigners were amazed at the sheer luxury of the sumptuous balls and masquerades. St. Petersburg became the center of an enlightened culture. The beginning of her reign was a period of luxury and excess. She had the most exquisite gatherings. When it came to dancing and splendor, no one could hold a torch to Elizabeth. With her beauty and fondness for dancing, she brought the grand ball to Russia. Elizabeth's presence created an elegance in Russian court and society that had never been seen before. Where her father ruled with force, Elizabeth ruled with style. It is reported that Elizabeth threw 2 balls a week. One would be a large event with an average of 800 guests in attendance, most of whom were the nation's leading merchants, members of the lower nobility, and guards stationed in and around the city of the event. The other ball was a much smaller affair reserved for Elizabeth's closest friends, as well as members of the highest echelons of nobility. The throne gave her an opportunity to realize all the dreams she had as a girl. The Empress spent all of her money on balls, masquerades, theater, and trips. Her court sometimes resembled a theater filled with French comedy and Italian operas. A historian wrote of Elizabeth's court and its lavishness, stating, "Her court was arrayed in cloth of gold, her nobles satisfied with the most luxurious garments, the most expensive foods, the rarest drinks, the largest number of servants, and they applied the standard of lavishness to their dress as well. Luxury in dresses exceeded all bounds. There was brocade, velvet with gold, silver and silk, and these in such quantities that the wardrobe of some couture or top was sometimes equal to the rest of their fortune, and even people of modest means had large wardrobes. But no one's was as grand as the Empress. Elizabeth owned an astounding 15,000 ball gowns, several thousand pairs of shoes, and an unlimited number of silk stockings. Elizabeth would change outfits 2 to 6 times a day, and never wore the same dress twice. A woman of great vanity, she insisted that in her change of dress all others at court did the same, which was an incredible expense. Not only did the Empress demand that all her courtiers wear the most luxurious clothes, she also insisted that no one wear the same dress twice, and had her men stamp gowns with special ink to enforce the rule. The notorious extravagance of Elizabeth came to define the court in many respects. Elizabeth created a world in which aesthetics reigned supreme, producing a court in which a tacit competition existed amongst courtiers to see who looked best, second only to Her Majesty, of course. While she expected everyone to wear different clothes and jewels at balls and court, none were to copy her dresses or hairstyles. Those who did were punished. She disliked women who appeared more beautiful than her. This made life at court quite difficult and required strategies to succeed. Today we look back on Elizabeth's reign as one long decadent party, but behind all the extravagance, Elizabeth was hiding a shameful truth. She was constantly on the brink of poverty. And though her ballrooms were decked out with the best music and food, the living quarters in her court were often cramped and squalid. The living quarters, where Elizabeth and her guests rested from the extravagant ballrooms, were astonishingly small, crowded, dirty, and shabby. Doors wouldn't shut, windows let in a draught, and water trickled down the walls, making the rooms damp and cold. There was so little furniture that it had to be transported whenever Elizabeth traveled from one residency to another. Mirrors, beds, and bedding, sometimes table and chairs, had to be broken apart in order to be moved. Elizabeth ruled in golden poverty. She left thousands of dresses, 2 chests of silken stockings, and a pile of unpaid bills and a massive half-built winter palace, which had already devoured giant amounts of money from the treasury. Before her death, Elizabeth wanted very much to live in the palace, even if for a little bit. However, her architect couldn't even finish the living quarters. The French stores refused to sell their goods on trust. Beautifully dressed, wonderful to look at, Elizabeth focused only on that which pleased her, while letting all that did not fall by the wayside. In light of this, history has judged Elizabeth as the frivolous empress, and sadly she herself might have agreed with that judgment.